Hello and welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Athena Sorensen. Thank you so much for tuning into our show today. But do not turn that channel. If you know of a young person who is struggling with depression or suicide, you do not want to miss this interview. We have Nick Love. He is a youth pastor at Anchor Church. And we have Christy Pierce. She has written a book called Shut Up. I love that title. And we are going to talk about all of these wonderful things, how to help our youth. So stay tuned. Now let's just jump right in. Here in Hawaii, we have a very high suicide rate. Our young people are going through so much, and God does not want our young people to be held down by all these chains. And let's just dive in. They're being bullied, they're depressed, they're anxious, feeling pressure, some are cutting themselves, they have eating problems, and they're suicidal. But why? Why are they going through so much?
You know, I really didn't honestly know much about this a number of years ago, even though I'm a mom with 3 teenagers.
Wow.
So that go to a very big Christian school, but I had no idea how bad the problems really are. But several years ago, very sad thing, a good friend of ours' son committed suicide, and so God really spoke very loudly to me at that point about writing this book, Shut Up, and it just has been, my husband calls it my unwelcome PhD into the world of teenagers right now, which it is staggering, you know, that teens, it's the second leading cause of death.
Wow.
The central disease says from 10 to 24, the CDC
From
says.
10, even down to the age of 10?
10 to 24,
Oh
so it includes college students. But it was the third leading a few years ago when I started the book, and then they moved it to the second leading. So it's really, Nick can comment because he's face to face with it with his kids.
Yes.
But it's very depression, anxiety. It's definitely a mental health crisis, you know, in the United States.
Well, just from my past experience, there's a variety of things that are thrown at you when you get to college. For me, it was the fact that I was the one having to pay for college, whether it was applying for scholarships all the time or knowing that I'm going to be in debt straight out of college, and all of those pressures are just so hard, and it always weighs on you, and it definitely weighed on me a lot. And also the fact of, like, you're going to college and you don't really know anyone, you don't really know what to do. People tell you need to get a job immediately, and so for me, I was working 2 jobs at once, plus having full-time school and joining all these clubs, and so it's just a lot of pressure from all different angles, and it's definitely one of those things that you never expect to be thrown into. People kind of tell you about it and they give you ideas, but you don't really know what it feels like until you're actually experiencing it. So that's definitely one of the things that was hard for me.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had the to deal with a suicide yet within a youth ministry that I've worked in. However, I don't think a student goes from 0 to suicide. They usually transition, as she mentions in the book, from anxiety to depression, and maybe a combination of both. Then they start taking or thinking of those steps of suicide. And she mentions in the book every 1.1 second a teen in America tries to commit suicides, and every 80 minutes they're successful. So we know that even though maybe we are not dealing with it, a suicide in our realm or in our sphere of influence, we know that students are trying it, and they are depressed, and there is an anxiety. And you mentioned, you know, you were kind of like took back like even 10-year-olds, and yeah, in some of the statistics in your book, the Federal Census Bureau actually said that, you know, from junior high students now, so like 10 to 14 age, is doubled the percentage of suicide and depression over the last, you know, I think it was from 2005 to 2014. So we're talking like big numbers that have changed radically over, you know, a short period of time, which that's the alarming thing.
Yes, it is. You've got kids around you all the time. They talk to you. What are the causes of these things? What are they going through on their day-to-day lives that they would even start to think that way?
Do you want to take that one on first?
It's multifaceted, I think. So that's what Nick was like, what?
Where do I start?
You know, I'm asked that a lot when I go speak, you know, why are things so bad? And, you know, when I speak to large groups of teenagers, It's truly shocking when you ask them, do you know of somebody now or in the past who has committed suicide? 90% of them will raise their hands.
Really?
Yeah.
And I say to them, when your parents, when we were growing up, I never heard of anybody that committed suicide. Maybe, you know, somebody that died and they were old, right? So this is the world these kids are growing up in.
This morning, November 4th, 2014, a 16-year-old boy took his own life.
The year changed, our class changed, we had one less person. It was pretty hard.
Thinking about like everything that happened junior year, obviously it's probably the worst year of my life.
And I'm speaking a lot to parents right now, and you know, they ask me, what's going on? Why is this escalated to such a crisis point? And you know, I think there are a number of things. I think the pressure in our culture these days,
Yeah, for sure.
wouldn't you agree, where these kids are like so much homework, you know, the sleep deprivation.
Oh, yeah,
The
that's a
American
big one.
Pediatric Association says that teenagers are pathologically sleepy, and they're actually lobbying to try to get schools to start later.
There's just so much competition. Even if it doesn't look like that from the outside, there are so many really talented students. 1, 2, 1, 2.
You know, I knew what I was getting myself into.
I guess junior year, senior year, I would meet with my counselor. She told me my junior year or sophomore year, I couldn't get a B, like I couldn't get another B after I'd gotten one B. So I just remember like that was like very, very like rigidly enforced in my mind.
I'm not actually sure like if I got B's now and I knew I was putting 100% in, how okay I'd be.
There are kids that graduated a couple years ago that already have multi-million companies and they're 20 now.
And there are a lot of kids who do feel like they should be up here, but they're not.
You know, around here, I think we don't talk with each other about the extent to which our kids might be struggling. There is this performance aspect of us as parents. We want to be able to put the right bumper sticker on our car.
You know, it's spiritual warfare.
Yes,
I mean, you've got
yes.
the warfare, social media. You know, I'm
Oh,
a social media idiot. My website, thankfully, is run by teenagers. But Nick, on the other hand, is very good at social media. What would you say about how social media has impacted
Has it made
this?
things worse?
Yeah, well, we do live in like the Instagram, Facebook world, and
Yes.
unfortunately, in those areas we put filters up. And so one of the issues with social media and technology in itself is that we believe that we're in some sort of relationship when we're in this like you know, tech world now.
Right.
And there's actually no healthy relationship being formed there. And, you know, Fuller Theological Institute had a study a few years ago that said, you know, for a student to be successful in life, meaning having happy family life, having healthy relationships with peers, coworkers, students that they go to school with, that they should have at least 5 mentors in their life. And what we're finding is, as you go back 20, 30 years ago, is most kids wanted to get connected some way, as they do now, but they didn't have the avenue of the cell phone or the mini computer in their hand.
Right.
They had to actually go out and ride their
Meet
bike
a
down the
person.
street
Right.
and meet the coach and hang out. And so I really want to push kids that the phone is a great tool, but like anything, when you use it too much, it can become bad.
Right.
And they're losing that actual physical relationship. And there's no mentorship because of it.
Right.
There's no discipleship because of it. And so one of my things is pushing kids into sports, extracurricular activities, so that they can find these mentors that can actually see through the fakeness of social
Right,
media
right.
and actually pour into them and say, hey, there's something wrong here. I'm asking
Yes.
purposeful questions. And that's why youth ministry is super important right now. You know, trying to battle this cultural war, but also trying to get into these kids' lives has become a lot more difficult, especially over the last 3 years. I was just speaking at a school here in Hawaii, and I asked all the students, I spoke 3 classes, 30 kids in each class, how many have an iPhone? And every single one of them in one class raised their hand. All of another class, except for one, raised their hand. And then the last class, the majority of them raise their hand. And we're talking,
Wow.
the vast majority of them now have these
cell phones.
Yeah, cell phones in their hands, and they're on it constantly.
Yes.
Just walk around and look at youth today. Their heads
They're
are usually
staring.
down.
Yes.
And they're not hanging out.
interacting.
They're not interacting. Asking, hey, how's your mom doing?
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, how's your brother? I know he hurt
They'll
his leg.
text each other though.
Yeah, and it's like crazy. You're thinking to yourself, like, there's
Yeah.
no relationships being formed
yeah.
anymore. So even their peers don't know what's going on in their
Right.
life
Yeah.
because all they see is this social media world of them.
It's true.
And it's easy to put a filter up to hide yourself.
Yes, it
It's
is.
not easy to hide yourself in a conversation.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And there's this cyberbullying that goes on
Oh,
that's so
yes.
hard for kids. You know, they're even as minor as like they're looking at Snapchat and everybody else is at the party and no one
Yeah.
invited me.
Yeah.
Or, you know, we've seen a lot of that in my kids' school, a lot of bullying that goes on, cyberbullying. So that's a negative of the
Yes.
social media
It
part.
causes a lot of
There's
problems.
actually and when I was reading your book, I was thinking to myself of some of this stuff. There's a scientific aspect to social media where we know now like dopamine is released in the brain, which is a chemical that forms an addiction. It's the same chemical that's released when we win in gambling or we think we're going to go drink alcohol or like there's this excitement aspect of it. And every time a kid or a student, anyone gets a like on Instagram or gets a new follower on Facebook or Instagram, this dopamine is released. And so now all of a sudden they're not getting that.
Right.
And so they're searching for it more and more and more. And there's this addiction that's being formed within the phone. And it in itself, it's actually this like downward spiral. So with the bullying, we also see this like this external thing coming at them where it's like they're addicted to getting likes, and when they're not getting it, just like any other disease like gambling or whatever, now all of a sudden we're adding on to this anxiety,
Yeah.
which then adds on to depression usually, then which leads into what we're talking about today is these voices in your head that's pushing you to do the ultimate step that no one wants to see you do.
Hi, my name's Julie, and one thing I've learned about people is that you can look really good on the outside and just be completely miserable on the inside, and that's part of my story. I was secretly battling low self-esteem and depression. I was battling so much performance and social anxiety, a lot of guilt and shame for pretty much everything I did bad. I felt like a horrible person. I hated myself. I felt like a fake and a phony, and I didn't want anyone to know. Not even my best friends knew that I was battling these things, and I would turn to self-destructive behaviors. I would turn to acting out sexually or partying, drinking, getting drunk, and other self-destructive choices that were harmful to me. You know, I believed in God and I was crying out to Him, but I just didn't believe that He loved me, that He could. I had so much guilt and shame. And I honestly was believing the lie from the devil that I was unlovable, that I was no good, that I was ugly and stupid, and that if anybody knew how I was feeling, nobody would love me, that nobody would accept me. And I believed that lie because I didn't know my identity. And so the devil was definitely trying to get me to feel so miserable that I would rather die than endure the pain.
At the age of 23, after a painful breakup and just everything coming up, I attempted suicide because I just did not want to deal with the pain anymore. And I honestly did not want to die. I just was crying out for help. I wanted the pain to leave, and it didn't. And so, you know, Jesus just thankfully had mercy on me, and I'm so thankful I wasn't successful with that, because if I had been successful with that, I think about all that I would have missed out on in life. And it's so hard to think about that my family wouldn't be here, my girls would not be here, that so many people would be suffering, my friends and family, because of that choice. And so it's been such a blessing to now know what I didn't know then, which was that the pain wasn't going to last, that there was hope, and that things were going to get better.
Why is it so hard for a young person to tell an adult that they're having these problems.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have done a number of surveys with hundreds of kids, really, and asking them. We actually put up on the screen, if you're in trouble, whether you're being bullied or you're depressed or anxious or suicidal, who would you tell? And we give them some choices, from a teacher to a pastor to a counselor, and then, you know, at the bottom it's a friend or no one. And 80% of them will say it's a friend or no one.
Really?
So they stay very isolated. It's a terrible situation because teens are suffering and yet they're telling no one. And one of the things we found is there's just a huge gap between a teen that's hurting and actually getting help, definitely counseling help. You know, let's just talk about the clinical thing, you know, to try and get some sort of Christian counseling or counseling. Because first, that teen would have to be willing to tell their parent, and that's sometimes a problem. But even if they told the parent would have to be willing to have the money, and you get them support. And if the parent has the money, then most good adolescent psychiatrists and counselors have a waiting list a mile long.
Really?
So it's a real gap, which is part of what we're trying to do with Shut Up, is to put something in kids' hands that they can do for themselves.
So for me, mental health and my faith are really important, and I think the conversation surrounding how do we deal with our mental health as Christians is something that I'm very passionate about. And so getting to read Shut Up, I was super excited. There was another resource, another book that was going to delve into these topics and say, you know, Christianity and Jesus are not incompatible with depression and anxiety, and to know that these two things can coexist and there can be hope amidst that, because Jesus isn't just going to let these things be, but that he's a God of redemption.
And so they often will tell a friend, and that puts the friend in a very hard place. We have a part on our website that says what to do if your friend tells you something, you know. I mean, it's sad that I should have to be teaching. I mean, my three kids all know if a friend comes to them, we have to behind the scenes kind of get help so that they don't feel like they betrayed the friend, but at the same time we get them the support they need. So that's a difficult thing.
Okay. Now, what are some signs or warnings that a teen could be suicidal or even just depressed? They don't have to necessarily be suicidal, or they're going through something. What have you seen? Kids acting a certain way? You said you have teenagers. How do you know?
Yeah, well, I'm really blessed that my teens are pretty openly honest people. In fact, Annie would be saying to me right now if she were here, "Now, Mom, I told you don't write a chapter on social media because you're going to make no one happy." Some kids are like, "This is my life, this is my world." Other kids will be like, so, you know, they're pretty ruthlessly honest, which is fantastic, you know, and I'm very blessed that they do talk to me. But I guess that's what I would say is the hardest thing is to not stay isolated, and because, you know, you don't know unless they'll open up and talk to you. But of course, you know, in my book there's a depression screening tool and an anxiety screening tool, just to at least give you a sense if you're weepy all the time, or you won't get out of bed, or you know, anxiety is huge. And college students, you know, the statistics now say something like 40 to 50%, the latest, are college students that feel that they can't even function because they're so anxious or depressed. And most people, the doctors, feel that's underreported because those are just the ones that come in to a counselor's office. So there's just a lot of pressure, and it's really difficult to be, you know, suffering alone, feeling anxious or depressed. So to answer your question, I mean, you know, weepy, sad, isolated, not wanting to leave the house. Social anxiety is a big thing nowadays, where, you know, I mean, think of these kids. When you say 90% go, yeah, I know someone who's committed suicide, the world does not feel like a safe place.
I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I grew up in a Christian home, and I went to a Christian school, and I learned all the Bible verses, and I wish when I was in high school and middle school I knew how to apply those verses to my life, because when I was 13 my parents got divorced, and I had no idea what I was doing with all of that emotional distress, suffering in all areas, and I didn't know how to ask for help, and I didn't know how to use the Bible, which I was taught when I was younger, to really utilize those verses. I had no clue. No one had given me the tools to do that. When I was a senior in high school, the summer before, my 4 best friends called me up and they told me that my parents' problems and my siblings' problems were too much, and they couldn't be my friend anymore. And that was devastating to me. I was dealing with depression, anxiety, anorexia, and all of my siblings at that point in time had attempted to commit suicide. And then on top of that, there was sexual abuse in my family. So there was just a lot of things going on, and I had no one I could talk to. If you have a friend who's struggling, who's going through anxiety or depression, or mentions something to you, how can you teach them to shut up the lies? And I think that's what's so important in this book, is learning the tools to help those friends. Not only can you shut up the lies to yourself of like, I'm not pretty, I don't have a boyfriend, no one loves me, oh my gosh, I got a C on this test, like I'm a failure, I didn't get into the school I wanted to, my parents are going to be disappointed in me. Your value isn't in those things, it's in what God thinks of you. And the best part about this book is that it reaches everybody, not the ones who are just hurting and struggling with depression, but it gives you this tool to shut up the lies in your own life that maybe don't seem as important as the friend that's struggling, but to God, those lies are important, and being a good friend to someone who's hurting is the most important thing and the most godly thing that you can do.
Yeah, there's a couple of different cues physically that we can see too. Regressing into the back of the group and not actually coming into the group. So those types of physical attributes, we can say, okay, there's something here. And just really having your blinders
Just
up.
as a parent.
Yeah,
just
as a
to
parent,
know.
and asking good questions.
Yes.
You know, like you were saying, it's like asking some of these questions of why. Again, this comes to relationships.
Yeah.
And you know, trying to form those relationships to get into the door, to ask some meaningful questions about the emotional aspect of it, to see if there is anxiety or depression.
Right.
Is a really healthy thing and first step.
Now, how does a parent reach out to their kid if they suspect something's going on? You know, that's very touchy. They don't want to say the wrong thing. Do you have advice of how they can even approach their child without pushing them farther away?
Right. Well, my son Benji, actually, in a very nice way, when he was going through some bullying, and we were talking about it, and I was saying, well, we've got to do this, we got to do this, we should go to the school, we should, and Benji just in a very nice way said, Mom, I need you to shut up and listen, kind of thing to me. So that is the name of the new book that we're writing for parents, and I guess I don't say that as a parent, you know, our worst thing is we're just trying to do our very best to love our kids, so all of us feel like, are we doing it right? But listening is such a big deal, you know, so I think listening to your kid respectfully, one of the things teens will tell me that they're afraid of telling their parent is they're afraid they're going to be kind of dismissed. Oh, you're fine, or you're just being hormonal, or you're exaggerating. So that causes a teen to want to talk less, you know. So I would say, you know, just making it a safe place to be able to go, how are you doing? You know, I really do want to hear, oh, this is a big one. Annie says all adults should say, we can't possibly understand your world. She's like, don't get up and say, oh, we know what it's like don't, you know.
Because the world is different.
Yeah, so for parents to say, we know you're under so much pressure, we can't possibly understand, but I care, I love you, I'm here.
Yes. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Yes.
You know, Nick would probably have some wisdom about that. But.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think not only do we have to listen, but there also has to be a presence. Right now, we have epidemic numbers. Like, there's an epidemic, I should say, of fathers being out of the home. And I think 24.7 million children in America right now don't have their biological fathers in the home. So that's around 33%.
That's a lot.
And what I've noticed, and I'm drawn to students who don't have fathers, is that a lot of them don't have this person to bounce anything off of because they're in a single home, their mother's working 2 jobs to take care of the family, and the father's been gone.
There's no one there.
And so this is a huge problem that I see. It's actually the biggest problem I see within youth ministries is father being out of the home and not being present in the home. You know, I know for me it was a huge struggle and continues to be a struggle. So, you know, I think that's something that we need to focus on as parents. It's just being present.
That's good.
And so listening, but also being present, because if you're not there, you can't help.
Right. Yeah. And how important is it to have them go to church?
Well, I was just
you're
going to
a
add
youth
that.
pastor.
I was just going to add that. You know,
that's an outlet for them, right?
one of the things that I see right now within our culture is that we have devalued church.
Yes.
Okay. So our number one value right now is education. And then after that is usually extracurricular activities, because those are going to help us get to the next level of education.
Right.
Then we'll go family, and then we'll go our faith. Okay, so that's all confused. That's not how it should be. It should be faith, family
Right.
than football, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so as long as we're clear on the football, I'll be on the third thing. But I've actually had, you know, a lot of parents tell me like, oh, they can't make it to youth group or they can't make it to the church service because they have a soccer game.
Right.
Soccer's not going to last forever,
No,
but
it's
their
not.
spiritual soul is. It's eternal, right?
Yes.
And so we have devalued our faith in the church in general.
Yeah.
And I want to say this, like, one of the most amazing moments I've had in ministry, well, that I've seen in ministry with youth, is when Christy was speaking at a conference. And Christy, afterwards, you were praying. You're like, I just want to pray for all you youth. And the line was out the door.
Really?
Right? You remember that a
Yeah.
few years back? And the reality is those kids wouldn't have gotten the prayer, or received, I should say, the prayer, if they weren't
weren't
at the
there.
event.
That's really
Exactly.
true.
Okay.
It is hard to get your kids there, but Nick is absolutely right, because getting your kids into a place where they can, you know, experience God's presence and learn the Word of God and hear good preaching. I mean, it's
Yes.
really, it's something that sadly in this country,
Yeah.
people are moving away from.
Away
So,
from it.
yeah.
Right. Because
Yeah.
in reality, I mean, the movies, the social media, all these things, they don't feed them really. I mean, it feeds them junk,
Yeah.
but they're not being spiritually fed. You know, they don't have that chance to really fall in love with Christ. You know, he was a cool dude. I like to think of him as someone who was cool. He
Yeah.
could reach little kids, grown-ups, anyone. And just the word of how he said, I have come that they might have life and they might have it more abundantly. And how are young people supposed to even know those things if parents are just like, oh, you know, that's church, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, if a parent sees this, you're giving them away for free. Is that correct?
We are. Our mission, our dream is that every single teenager that would want one of these books, we want to get it into their hands. There's a chapter at the very end called Finding Safe People Who Will Shut Up and Listen. So right there are 10 different things they can do themselves, be it, you know, crises text line here in Hawaii, or, you know, they can do online counseling, or they can call their youth pastor. They, you know, just like, it's almost like a menu you spread out in front of them that they can select from. So our passion is to get these books into kids' hands. If any kid cannot afford one, we want to mail it to them. So our website has that information. They can email Julie, and she will make sure they get a book for free.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful resource. Well,
Right.
thank you so much for both of you
Thank
being
you for
here
having
today.
us.
Thank you.
Continue doing what you're doing. Our youth, they just need it.